The telephoto lens can be used for its magnifying properties, capturing subjects at a distance, or it might be used to dramatically lessen the depth of field, allowing for a highly selective focus. It condenses the distance between objects, whether those objects are near and far, or far and farther, such that a background will lose its depth, closing the gap between background and foreground. Any perceived distance between the foreground subject and the background setting collapses. In its most extreme manifestations, with focal lengths in the hundreds, the telephoto lens can create highly stylized images, redefining the spatial relations among elements in a profoundly unnatural compression of space. Quebecois filmmaker Jean-Claude Labrecque began his career at the National Film Board of Canada, training in cinematography. By the time that he departed from the film board to begin his own independent film company in the late 1960s, Labrecque had gained a considerable esteem in Canadian film culture for his mastery of the expanding toolkit of the cinematographer in an era of rapid technological innovation. He had used a 1000mm telephoto lens acquired from NASA for the opening shot of his 1965 documentary 60 Cycles, a film about a long-distance bike race in Quebec. In 1970, Labrecque would again use the lens, this time to make a short film, Essai mille, or Test to the Thousand, that deliberated upon the various ways in which this extreme telephoto distortion could impact perception, the aberrations of vision and abstractions of form that it could provoke, the hallucinatory process of charting and collapsing great distances. Popular understandings of the Earth's place in the universe were evolving in the 1950s and 1960s. Keyes Boak's 1957 children's book The Cosmic View, The Universe in 40 Jumps, mapped out orders of magnitude around a simple scene, both inward to the atomic level and outward to the widest celestial frame imaginable. Boak's book is a significant accomplishment. It anticipates the color satellite images of the Earth's surface that began to circulate 10 years after it, and conversely, it celebrates the legacy of photomicrography, the long development of which culminated in the first photographs of the atom only 2 years earlier in 1955. The orders of magnitude, considered from the atomic up to the cosmic scale, or from the galaxy back down to the nucleus, would soon become the subject of films. Only 2 years before Labrecque's film, the outward and inward trajectory of Boak's Cosmic View had inspired 2 films that visualized such leaps of scale in near identical ways. Robert Verrill's Cosmic Zoom, made by Labrecque's former colleagues at the National Film Board, and Powers of 10, made by modernist designers and filmmakers Ray and Charles Eames. These were essentially optimistic visions that sought to use scientific mastery at its most extreme scales to declare humankind's place as a defining perspective of the universe, as dwarf to heavenly bodies, as giant to the particle. In these projects, humankind, whether in the form of a family laying on the grass for a picnic, or a boy fishing with his dog, occupies the fixed subject from which the viewer journeys along these scales of magnitude. These figures occupy a position akin to that shifting valley of focus that defines machined optics. Their bodies become hyperfocal objects. Each of these projects offers precise visions of the atomic and the astronomic along a scale of magnitude. These visions are plainly illustrated, but one essential and inevitable truth of these extremes, the outer limits of the universe, the biophysical makeup of the organism, is that they simply do not belong to the visible world of everyday perception. The isolated planes of inner and outer reality remind the subject that they are lonely specks in a cosmic sea, floating in miniature. Like J. Alfred Prufrock, they ask the impotent question, "Do I dare to disturb the universe?"
J'entendis alors une grande voix, hors du temple, disant aux 7 anges, allez et versez sur la terre les 7 coupes de la fureur de Dieu.
Test of the Thousand is not concerned with orders of magnitude, but it suggests the operations of a greater cosmic order, announced in the Lunar Halo that opens it. It is not an evidentiary demonstration of the relative scales of the earthbound, the celestial, and the infinitesimal, although it does represent the closing of great distances. It shares in the greater project of positioning the Earth in a context. That context isn't upwards to the heavens or inwards to the molecule, but pointed toward the horizon, an area that, in the open landscape, so often extends beyond vision, but which also remains traversable, within reach. Unlike the cosmic projects, it's not a work of technological optimism. It is eschatological, a condition laid plain by the soundtrack taken from Pierre Henry's Apocalypse de Jean, which declares the arrival of a final cataclysm. In Labrecque's poetics, the telephoto lens, a mechanical extension of the limited scope of human vision, sees not only to the distance, but to the future, to a tempest of sunlight piercing the earth. Test of the Thousand, like the Book of Revelation, is a phenomenal catalog, a summary of contents that takes a parting glance at the earth. The Book of Revelation deals with the end of the world brought about by the closing of a distance between life and the beyond, between the world as we know it and an intruding symbolic reality. It is a cleansing fire, and so too Labrecque's film shall become by the last of its 4 episodes. The first of these episodes is a prologue. The moon is seen through a distant cloud cover, the only light in a pitch-black sky. Labrecque's composition centers the moon as a lunar halo forms around it, an optical phenomenon with folkloric implications. In farmers' almanacs, lunar halos were believed to anticipate storms, making this halo's appearance a declaration of the film's apocalyptic themes. The lunar halo is a perfect circle, which Labrecque adjusts through his zoom ring, a declaration of the supremacy of the camera's mechanical eye. The lens zooms in to the blown-out moon, allowing the light of it to overtake the image. As clouds pass in front of the moon, there's a subtle match cut that relocates the light in the distance as the headlight of a train. The camera now points down a train track, its vision clouded by heat waves. However rapidly the train may be approaching, the long duration of this shot is proof that Labrecque's lens is delivering a deceptively machined vision. It will take a full 2 minutes and 14 seconds to come near enough to become visible as an engine front. For that duration, the eye is left to consider the composition's extreme compression of the train tracks, the power lines, and vehicles that pass at a crossing just ahead. The eye is also left to consider another effect of the lens distortion, the magnified heat waves. These heat waves mark the entire composition with post-impressionist style, the rigid lines of the train tracks and electric poles frayed and vibrating. Labrecque's selection of the railway as a subject to demonstrate the illusionary effects of the telephoto lens has its roots in one of the first films, The Arrival of a Train at La Ciotat by the Lumiere brothers. The Lumieres signaled the technological marvel of a new age by reflecting back on another triumph of the industrial world, collapsing the distance of 19th century progress into a summary for a new century, from the steam locomotive of 1804 to the motion picture camera of 1895. Labrecque's train never arrives. Long before the train reaches the camera, a new image commands attention, of an airplane on a runway, obscured by those same vibratory heat waves. Labrecque is touring icons of bridged distances, the train which in the 19th century innovated cross-country travel, the airplane which in the 20th century made intercontinental travel almost casual, the moon beaming through this lunar halo, a transcendent distance recently crossed by the crew of the Apollo 11. These are not, strictly speaking, images of conquest, but they do suggest the ways in which humankind tames distances, exerting technological control to close the gaps between near and far. The telephoto lens does this, much as the telescope evolved, from nautical starfinders and spyglasses to the large optical reflecting telescopes of mid-century astronomical observatories. As the final passage begins, the transcendent distance of the moon is dwarfed by yet a greater distance, the sun. Labrecque zooms into the sun such that it fills the frame, and as it vibrates with magnified heat waves, it gives way to a rapid series of images. A family walking down a road, the shadows cast by a modern industrial bridge, a hydro tower and bridge seen through flames, the sunset eclipsed by the geometry of a vertical parking garage, a dog scampering through sun-licked dust, the sun a perfect yellow in a red sky, the dog barking furiously, riddled with light, children running towards the camera, the telephoto compression such that it almost appears as if they're running in place. With a final burst of red light, the image darkens, turning to a desolate landscape at night, its silence broken by distant howls, its stillness broken by the swarming of tiny whiteflies. The Book of Revelation long pre-existed the heliocentric model of the universe. It wasn't until the mid-16th century that Copernicus offered such a model of the cosmos, upsetting the solipsism of humankind. Still, the visions of John the Revelator draw from long-held imaginings of a fiery damnation. Like Copernicus's On the Revolution of Celestial Spheres, the Book of Revelation was about cosmic relations, in its case, the distances of angels. The cosmic view, cosmic zoom, and powers of 10 are evidence of the popular imagination of science as it had formed by the late 1960s. Labrecque reimagines the triumph of optics in Fire and Brimstone. Throughout, Labrecque is accompanied by condensed excerpts from a late passage in musique concrète composer Pierre-Henri's Apocalypse de Jean, a work that combines found sound and electronic tone generation with a dramatic reading by actor Jean Negroni. These parts form a sonic adaptation of the Book of Revelation, something like an oratorio that draws from a radiophonic atmosphere and bleats of modulated sound to bring the menace of the end times into a definitive present. If the religiosity of Labrecque's imagery was ambiguous in isolation, it becomes profoundly Christian with this context. Two identifiable passages take prominence, placing emphasis on the fury of God and a merciless sun, ignited by angels to burn men with fire. Revelation 16:1.
J'entendis alors une grande voix hors du temple, disant aux 7 anges, allez et versez sur la terre les 7 coupes de la fureur de Dieu.
And 16:8.
Versa sa coupe sur le soleil, les hommes étouffèrent d'une chaleur extrême.
Like Henri, Labrecque is resituating this provocative fantasy of damnation into a present moment of technological mediation, with a gaze as blank and pitiless as the sun. Although Henri's composition continuously imposes eschatological themes upon the film, it is only in the film's final passage that it is transformed from a study in space and optics into a full apocalypse. This apocalypse is also a further catalogue of the Earth, turning away from a world of machine and mechanism to include the presence of human and animal life. Telephotography keeps these elements at a distance, but it does something else to them as well. It allows all those traits emphasized by distortion, heat waves, air particulates, to appear as if they are permeating and flowing through the distant figures. The child runs in place. The light itself speeds through them to reach us. If Test to the Thousand has a core poetic allegory, it is this: a solar permeation that rends space and scatters and immolates its subjects, an obliteration of depth.